Paddy the Baddy.
Paddy Pimblett.
Paddy Pimblett.
What about Paddy the Baddy?
Paddy Pimblett, man.
He appears to have a great belief in his future potential by the boss.
Yeah, we knew that he was going to be big.
What makes a superstar? A look, charisma, something else? Nobody really knows for sure. Usually people define the ability of being able to gain popularity quickly as having the it factor, and Paddy the Baddy Pimblett definitely has it. But in his case, it might not be such a good thing, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why. But first, let's get acquainted with the man of the hour. Paddy, real name Patrick Pimblett, is a 27-year-old mixed martial artist from the Liverpool borough in Merseyside, England, currently fighting in the UFC's lightweight division. He's most recognizable by his distinct haircut, which he claims he keeps to make himself as relatable as possible to younger fans, as well as his identity as a Scouser. A Scouser, for those not from across the pond like myself, is defined as a person from Liverpool, but it's somewhat of a stereotype in the United Kingdom. In addition to their very distinct accents, they're often depicted as loving to drink and being ready to fight at a moment's notice, and have been famously satirized on the 90s British sketch show Harry Enfield and Chums. In it, they're depicted as having long curly hair and 70s porn stashes, partly inspired by soccer player Kevin Keegan, who played for the Liverpool Football Club between 1971 and 1977.
So what did you get up to last night then, eh?
Hey, it was magic. I took this bird to the pickies, then went back to her place for a shag.
Oh, great. Who was it? Anyone I know?
Yeah, it was actually. It was your girlfriend, Samantha.
Oh, great.
Yeah. She said I'm much better in bed than you.
Did she? Yeah, well, not as good as thought, eh?
Hey?
The stereotype is not always played up as a friendly rib, however. Some people in England genuinely don't like them. If I had to draw a parallel with the United States, I compare them to the Jersey Shore Guido stereotype, especially from the early 2010s. Some people found them to be ironically hilarious, and some people literally thought they were the scum of the earth, no in between. And the love him or hate him energy is a large part of the reason why Paddy has garnered so much popularity in such a short amount of time. He loves Liverpool, its culture, the people living there, and wears the stereotypes like a badge of honor. In other words, he's real and relatable, and that's something that he himself has said time and time again, sometimes also sharing his disdain for fighters that he deems to be fake.
I hate Colby Covington, lad.
Why?
Don't know if you know him or not.
Yeah.
Lad, I hate him, lad.
Why?
I hope he gets hit by a bus. Lad, he's just proper annoying. Like, I've been told he's got a ghostwriter and all that, lad. Doesn't even come up with all his own stuff he comes out with.
What?
Like, it's all an act, innit?
Paddy is undoubtedly a man of the people, doing everything from hanging out at his local bars to singing post-fight songs about the Hillsborough disaster, a controversial event where 96 people died due to a stampede during a soccer match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, with the 97th person dying 32 years later as a result of the irreversible injuries and brain damage he had suffered during the event. The adoration he receives has often led to comparisons between him and Irish superstar Conor McGregor, which I personally don't agree with. Paddy and Conor are only similar in that they both have an accent and a lot of fans. Other than that, they're drastically different people. Conor has made a career out of having out-of-this-world confidence, almost bordering on mania. He often says things like this.
Me and Jesus are cool. I'm cool with all the gods. Gods recognize gods.
Well, Paddy is much more open with his emotions, commenting on mental health issues plaguing men, and often mentioning how the suicide rates in Liverpool doubled since 2019. He even went as far as sharing a story of his friend Ricky taking his own life a few hours before the weigh-ins for his third UFC fight. In fact, he's gone even further and described how he's had his own thoughts of ending it all after losing his Cage Warriors title back in 2017.
I was waking up every morning crying for 3 months.
Really?
Yeah, every morning.
How bad was it, mate? Is it?
I thought about taking my own life, I'll be honest, yeah, I did it.
I'd also like to add here that Paddy is an extremely emotional person in general. He has a tendency to fly off the handle when he feels even a little bit slighted. The biggest proof of this is the fact that he's currently banned off Twitter and has had 2 of his Instagram accounts deleted in the past for essentially sicking his followers on people he had online disagreements with. He also never filters his thoughts, like the time he called Mark Zuckerberg a lizard, again because he was upset that he was banned off of Instagram. Instagram for retaliating against bullies, or when he ignited a feud with UFC lightweight Ilya Topuria because he made insensitive comments about the people of Georgia, calling them dumb for being occupied by Russia, again because he was in the middle of an online argument. He calls people bullies almost as a defense mechanism, but seems to be unable to take any type of responsibility for his own actions that could be interpreted in the same exact way. I'm not saying this for no reason, by the way. This character flaw will become extremely important later on. Good, bad, or ugly, Paddy is extremely popular in Liverpool and England in general. Part of that is his magnetic personality, and part of it is a phenomenon psychologists call burging, or basking in reflected glory. It's defined as the tendency to create, magnify, or promote one's association with successful or desirable others. But basically, it comes down to, hey, you remind me of me, so I want to live vicariously through your success. And that support has led to an insane level of marketability for Paddy. Unlike 99.9% of the fighters outside of the top 15, he has multiple sponsorship deals including Applied Nutrition, Apex Fightwear, Arise Media, and of course the 7-figure deal with Barstool Sports that he got as a result of Dave Portnoy simply being a fan. His star power is undeniable. In fact, he has generated so much outside profit for himself that between 2016 and 2020, he has turned down 2 UFC offers, choosing to enter when he felt ready. But it wasn't always like that. As a kid, Paddy was scrawny and undersized. He dreamt about being a soccer player, but due to being a late bloomer, was not able to keep up with his peers physically.
I was good up until about the age 8, 9, and then I stayed that level till I was 17, 18, so everyone else just passed me by.
When he was 14, his friend Kyle Wilson showed him a video of Diego Sanchez fighting Clay Guida on the Ultimate Fighter 9 finale. Feeling inspired, Paddy decided to join Next Generation MMA a few months later when he turned 15, a gym that he fights out of to this day. After making his professional debut at 17 and compiling a record of 3-0, he would make his way to Cage Warriors, going 19-3 by 2021 and winning the featherweight and lightweight championships in the process. It was during this time that he also met his manager, Graham Boylan, who's a key figure in the story. We'll talk about him in a second. While Paddy was becoming very popular in the UK, the US fans and media weren't as receptive. This was the Conor McGregor era, and a lot of people felt that Paddy was simply a cheap imitation. Some looked at him as being kind of goofy, going semi-viral for throwing up in the cage during his post-fight interview after fighting Julian Narosa in 2016. Basically, people thought that he was kind of a jackass. But there was one media personality that never hesitated to provide him with airtime and exposure, and luckily for Paddy, the man was one of the biggest names in MMA, Ariel Helwani. Going back over 4 years, Paddy has been a guest on Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour on several different occasions. The two even joked about Ariel being the only American media member to give him exposure.
You only get love on this show, huh? None of the Americans have jumped on the bandwagon, right? I feel like they're a bit late on this one.
Outwardly, the two had a very friendly relationship, with Ariel endearingly adopting Paddy's Hauser slang, using the word lad when the two would speak, and generally being prideful for jumping on the Paddy Pimblett bandwagon early due to feeling like he was late to the Conor McGregor party, only becoming acquainted with him as he was about to enter the UFC. The two would often speak about Paddy entering the UFC, and Ariel would even suggest trying rival organizations like Bellator for potentially better pay, but Paddy was always destined for the Ultimate Fighting Championships, and that was because of one man.
It's good to see a full house in Neptune. It's amazing to see a highly educated crowd in Neptune.
Graham Boylan is Paddy Pimblett's manager, who also happens to be the president of Cage Warriors. Cage Warriors is an unofficial talent feeder organization for the UFC. There's a long list of fighters that went on to fight and be successful in the UFC that began their careers in Cage Warriors, particularly those starting their careers on the European and British circuits. For example, Michael Bisping, Gegard Mousasi, Dan Hardy, and of course Conor McGregor. When promising talent signs to Cage Warriors, they generally also signed to Graham Boylan's management company. Then, once they're ready for the big leagues, Boylan funnels them to the UFC. That's exactly what happened with Paddy Pimblett. This creates a major conflict of interest because when your promoter is also your manager who financially benefits off your success, the fighter can receive extremely preferential treatment based off nothing else than how marketable they're perceived to be. When you control both the matchmaking and the promotional side of things, you can pretty much do whatever you want. There's another side to this as well. Because because Graham Boylan has a direct relationship with the UFC, he can help them in negotiating contracts for his fighters that aren't necessarily as beneficial to them as they could be in exchange for financial gain for Cage Warriors. For instance, getting them a deal on UFC Fight Pass, which they have. This is exactly the reason why the Ali Act exists in boxing. Not only does it require total financial disclosure from the promoter towards the fighter, but it also prohibits promoters from having a financial interest in the management of said fighter. This really doesn't have much to do with the topic at hand. The reason I'm telling you this at all is because Graham Boylan really doesn't like Ariel Helwani, and I want you to understand why. The reason is because Ariel says things like these.
For example, in the sport of boxing, you cannot be a manager and promoter. You can't. And that's the issue that I brought up last week with Graham Boylan, who's managing all these fighters, signs them to Cage Warriors, signs them to his management team, and then funnels them to the UFC. In fact, go look up Ross Houston and Soren Bach. Two guys who were a part of that system in Cage Warriors had to buy themselves out in order to go to Bellator. That's how one way this is.
It's also a big part of the reason why UFC president Dana White doesn't like Ariel. For better or worse, he's a true journalist. He's not a company man at all, and whether you're on friendly terms with him or not, he'll report on both the good and the bad of the sport. He won't just push your narrative like certain other journalists with Japanese last names. And I say this as someone that doesn't always agree with Ariel and thinks that he has a tendency to get personal sometimes, which sways his objectivity, but I have to give credit where it's due. So my Christmas gift just arrived, and this is the perfect time for a mid-video costume change, as well as an interjection. I just want to thank you guys for watching my video. I put a lot of hard work into it, and it really means a lot. If you enjoy what I do here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. Also, if you have a suggestion for a topic that you want to hear about next, let me know. I'll be releasing videos every Thursday. Now let's get back to business. On December 7th of 2022, Paddy Pimblett had UFC president Dana White on his podcast, The Chatting Pony. About 16 minutes into the 46-minute show, Paddy turned the topic towards journalists, and specifically Ariel Helwani. Here's what he had to say.
I hate all these journalists, especially the ones what earn off us, know what I mean? Like Ariel Helwani in particular, like he loves earning money off fighters. Yeah. Like every decent job he's had, he's been sacked from. You know what I mean? Like, and now he's just a biased content creator. Yeah. You know what I mean? 100%. And he hates on you, hates on the UFC, even hates on me now. Yeah. And it proper annoys me because he uses fighters for clicks, uses fighters to make money, and then tries to have the audacity to talk about the UFC and yourself, saying that they don't pay the fighters enough. Get your dough out, Ariel. You know what I mean? Start paying people for these interviews, what you make thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on. And I know that now because I make money off YouTube. So I know how much he earns off YouTube, off all his interviews, what he does. You're doing it for exposure. No, you're not. You're doing it to put money in your pocket, Ariel. You little rodent. Lad.
Woo! I just sat back and let that go. I didn't want to interrupt. He's a massive sack of is what he is.
Exactly.
He's the biggest piece of all time. And I couldn't have said it better.
This took the MMA community by surprise because while plenty of other fighters have had issues with Ariel Helwani in the past, mostly due to his brutally honest style of reporting, this was not expected out of Paddy. There have been some few and far between questions about Paddy no longer coming on to the MMA Hour, but there was no out in the open animosity between the two prior to this point. Ariel wasted no time responding and systematically broke down Paddy's argument point by point, citing text messages and even a voice note.
This is what the voice note said.
Yo, the big fella. What's going down, Ariel? Just thought I'd let you know, lad, if you wanted to say hi or do anything with a man. I'll be in NYC in November. I think I'm going to be there from the 3rd to the 6th. And then I'll be coming back again on the 17th or the 18th. And then be coming back to Liverpool on the 23rd. So I'm about in New York, 2 separate occasions, just in case you want to see your mate, you know what I'm saying?
This is an hour-long video, and honestly, it's ridiculously entertaining. I highly recommend that you watch it if you're interested in the finer details of what went down. To summarize the situation, Paddy's main gripe seems to be that Ariel makes money from fighters through Google AdSense on YouTube without cutting them in on the profits. Ariel, in turn, claims that he's signed to a contract with the company on whose YouTube channel his podcast is hosted and doesn't receive any boost in profit whether a video does 1 view or 1 million.
I have not earned a single extra dime. I've never gotten a bonus. I have never gotten a dime because a show did 100,000 views, 10,000 views, 1 million views. When we have Izzy in studio and it got like 800, I didn't earn a single penny more, less. It's all, I have a contract. And I make the exact same amount and I have never even gotten a bonus. I've never had a great year and someone's like, because your views were X high or you did better than we projected. I've never even profited in that way.
Now, Graham Boylan, Paddy's manager, asked Ariel to ask one of the companies he works for, BT Sport, to pay for an interview with Paddy over text, which Ariel felt insulted by. Ariel then proceeded to go on Pat McAfee's show and ask him if any fighter ever asked to pay for an interview, which coincided with a post on Graham Boylan's Instagram page where he talked about fighters being paid for interviews.
And in the interview with Pat, I said, hey, Pat, has anyone ever asked you for payment? He's like, no way, I would never do that. All right, I just wanted to know. Never mention Paddy, never mention Graham, never mention anyone. At the same time as all this was going down, on Graham's Instagram, he's posting a message to the fighters about they need to start getting paid. We have that. There it is. I didn't know that. You know why I don't know that? Because I don't follow him.
I'm fully on Ariel's side here. Even if he was 100% in the wrong, there is no reason to go on a public medium like your podcast and call him names, demean him, and try to make him feel as bad as possible over a pretty trivial situation that was largely resolved behind the scenes. And this is exactly why I devoted a segment in the beginning of this video to Paddy being emotional. This is what he does. This is what he's been doing throughout his career, except this time it wasn't just some online random trolls, another fighter, or Mark Zuckerberg who no fight fan really cares about. Sorry Mark, but you're a baller, you'll be fine. It was a very public figure within the MMA space. With that said, I'm gonna take a slightly different angle on this whole paying for interviews thing and briefly explain why I kind of understand where Paddy and his manager were coming from. While paying for interviews and appearances on television is borderline unheard of, unless the person interviewed has a ridiculous level of notoriety in that very moment, such as an O.J. Simpson or a Casey Anthony, Paddy stated that he considers Ariel to be a content creator. This got me thinking of another famous content creator, one who's famous for specifically doing interviews on his channel, DJ Vlad of Vlad TV. Here he is talking about this very topic.
Well, I have no problems paying for interviews. I've paid for interviews before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I've paid in the thousands before. Not the tens of thousands, but in the thousands.
I guess that kind of makes me understand what he was trying to do, but I think he is grossly overestimating his star power as well as the context of the interview. A run-of-the-mill appearance in the middle of a dozen other appearances on other programs doesn't mean much and isn't exactly that financially beneficial to BT Sport, MMA Fighting, or Ariel Helwani. It's just another press tour. I could understand if it was an exclusive interview where Paddy was coming off a huge controversy, kind of like what Ariel did with John Jones back in 2015, that would have potentially been worth paying for. But hey, ironically enough, Paddy may have created enough controversy for himself now to actually make that happen. They say bad things come in threes, and if the public's response to Paddy's podcast with Dana was the first, Ariel's reaction to it was the second, then his fight with Jared Gordon was definitely the third. At UFC 282, just 3 days after the controversy with Ariel, Paddy fought Jared Gordon. This was expected to be an easy victory, with Paddy going in as a 2.5 to 1 favorite. In fact, as often tends to happen with big names, there were rumblings all over of Gordon being picked specifically as a favorable matchup for Paddy in order to beef up his record. Unfortunately, this was anything but an easy fight. Falling for Gordon's left hook almost every single time, the only thing impressive about Paddy that night seemed to be his ability to take a shot. All but one MMA media site scored the fight for Gordon, with half having him winning every round. The consensus seemed to be the rounds 1 and 3 were clearly lost by Paddy, with 2 being up in the air. The judges, however, did not see it that way and scored the fight for Paddy. Still, the crowd was clearly loving Paddy and their adoration was his to lose. Well,
I'm making the winner, Paddy the Baddy. Paddy, that was a close one. No, it wasn't. That wasn't close. Stay there.
fighters, fans, and pundits collectively let their feelings be known online. Interestingly enough, Dana White said that Jared Gordon went into the third round with a dumb strategy, taking his foot off the gas.
Gordon had a horrible game plan going into that third round. You think you won the first 2 rounds with the judges? I mean, how do you know that? Why go in there and throw away the third round and not go in and fight your ass off and try to win?
Yet Paddy was the one that said this post-fight.
I won the first 2 rounds and then coasted in the third. I knew I was 2 rounds up, so I didn't want to do nothing dangerous and risk losing the fight.
But that's the upside of having the it factor. Your bosses give you leeway. They treat you like you're meant for success. So what's the downside? The character traits that make Paddy so popular are also the same ones that may lead to his downfall in the future. He's unapologetically him, and that includes being stubborn and set in his ways. And while that can earn him fans overnight, as we found out over the past 2 weeks, it can lose him fans even faster. The world loves winners, and it's easy to be adored when you're on top. You have the Midas touch and can do no wrong. But as soon as you show even a little bit of vulnerability, that adoration can turn into condemnation. There's a thin line between love and hate. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned a psychology term called berging, or basking in reflected glory. There's an opposite to that term as well. It's called corfing, or cutting off reflective failure. That defines people who distance themselves from entities or individuals who are perceived as failures. It is the opposite of living vicariously through someone. If Paddy lets these sorts of things become routine, we could soon see Scousers claiming him to be a fake, or saying that he's an idiot and that they're not all like that. It happens all the time. It could already be happening now. The most concerning thing seems to be that he's not improving at all as a fighter. He's improving as a marketer for sure, but fighting is his base. It's his story. Without it, he's just another guy on Instagram pushing fat burning pills. And that's the curse of having the it factor. One day you're the brightest star in the sky, and then some people in they both have a lot of fans and funny accent, and that's something is the fact that he's currently banned off Twitter and has a it seems to be unable to recognize his own actions. That I'm not saying this for no reason, by the way. This just delete it. Yeah, but I was like, yo, what do you mean?